Christina's Conscious Synergetic Thought Process presents Planet Utopia, Episode 23, November 4, 2022, Part 1. Vector Equilibrium's Motion Economics Evolves the Reality of Universe. Our 21st century humanity's relative curiosity concerns news of events, expecting to read of it in the usual communication channels. We do not expect to see seemingly unrelated terminology and conceptualities of generalized system, integrities, which typically are not heard of, not mentioned. This could be chalked up to esoteric specializations that typically are directed to specific educated fields of interest, not intended for the layperson, ordinary people like you and me. Nevertheless, everyone is searching for self-validating information as an observer of the reenacting articulations, for assuring and reassuring the tuned-in person. We naturally feel and want to be reassured that our individual intelligent inclusion in the grand scheme of things is relevant to amicable outcomes and ultimately experienced equanimity, evenness of mind's balanced mentality. In every sense of the word, equanimity. This means relevantly to the peace and goodwill under normal everyday circumstances where self and others can agree and disagree without resorting to exploitations in the value of doing harm. Such personalized evaluations harken back to the old adage, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But that too can be subject to interpretations for justifying and rationalizing any degree of resentful animosity when an insult injures pride and can trigger detrimental reactions from early lessons in family dynamics. It can be when vengeance is pridefully cultivated as a righteousness done unto others as they did unto the reactionary personality for some inane, indefinitely lasting, well-taught tradition. Spite also permits seemingly harmless payback that can quickly get out of control and is not easily taken back to zero time size once acted on. Wherever equanimity is most highly valued, our contemporary concerns about the interpersonal and other communication inputs and outputs require systemic thought's omni-rational mind and a conceptual model that were once unknown. Because the equanimity model once was unknown, it is unlikely that enough people know of it now to have found its way into the mainstream universal communications process, where events of every imaginable articulation continue adding insults to injuries, as humans have no conscious awareness of equanimity as a conceptual alternative. As we begin to understand why the geometry of the equanimity model has not made its way into the world of newsworthy events, this also opens a complicated communications process involving more than most of us have yet to give any consciously coordinated thought and language. All of us, in one way or other, are actors on the world stage. We are interrelating communicating systems. The various communication networks accommodate what each of us contributes to the universal communications process, whether observing and or articulating. And it can go on seemingly indefinitely without compelling anyone to redirect the illogical, irrational formulations until the individual consciously decides to do so. But that too is awkward In a world of subconsciously ignorant and fearful cautionaries where survival is at stake, the survival of every degree of freedom, to speak the truth and to expect others to speak the truth. Is truth in equanimity conceptual as an anticipatory design science geometric model? The question seems least inapplicable to ordinary concerns about human events, as each of us must survive the moment to understand what is going on from one day to the next. It is wherever emphatically preferred nomenclature is controlled by political, religion, justice, and war-motivated agendas. PRJWBCH. Politics, religion, justice, war, belief complex hierarchies, a contextual parameter that is also unknown. In mainstream channels, where agendas of every size, shape, and hue comprise a persuasive spectrum of human events, the experiences, intuitions, speculations, experiments, discoveries, and productions, EISEDP, Synergetics 502.22. Apparently, viable alternatives for most amicable outcomes continue to be linked to belief complex schemes and profit motivation hierarchies that are obsolete. They are obsolete because there is no reference to universe's metaphysical and physical intertransforming energetic synergetic environments for the potential generalized conceptioning that relies on learning more about the geometric models, one of which is the vector equilibrium. The vector equilibrium is the equanimity model that in universe shares the same design in both the metaphysical generalized conceptioning and the physical energy environment, metaphysical intellect, as a function of omnirational universe, is referentially, mindfully aware of the generalized conceptioning field of thought, including systemic thought's synergetic geometry, tuning in observers on the world stage of potentially viable alternative options, strive to locate like-mindedness, expecting those events will strike a familiar chord. Yet even such compatibility is fleetingly conceptual concerning any in-depth significance to originating influences that are barely grasped as an integral, processed experience. We are just now learning from R. Buckminster Fuller that when you process your experiences, it produces a geometry. There is also synergetics, which is the geometry of thinking, that closely correlates to conceptualizing eternal generalized principles where there is always one term on one side of the equal sign and at least two or more on the other side of the equal sign. For example, E equals mc to the second power. Typically, humans react in various ways, correlating to how we were taught from childhood. Since the equanimity model was not an integral childhood referential conceptuality, writing about it now still requires a differently coordinated thought and language from when it was unknown. It would make little to no sense for me to inform you that the vector equilibrium is the equanimity model, and that in the metaphysical and physical universe it shares the same design, while expecting that the words equanimity, geometric model, vector equilibrium, metaphysical universe, and design will inspire a deeper curiosity about how it can possibly apply to manifesting a true democracy is hopeful at best. To make matters in this entire regard slightly more unlikely, is for you to see and hear any mention of the vector equilibrium equanimity model in the mainstream, where we normally expect to be informed of both the problems besetting our humanity, but also a viable, easily manageable, rational solution. It would not automatically dawn on us to count on the vector equilibrium as the equanimity model when we have been programmed and educated in almost all aspects by the PRJWBCH communications process without it in mind. Now, though, you are reading or listening to my Planet Utopia podcast, which is an anticipatory design science, self-educating research project that is barely off the ground. So new in the 21st century, is it? But where else and how else can humans of a mind, our highly intelligent evolution species, imagine designing a whole new world that considers planet Earth a perfect prototype, especially since the geometer Bucky Fuller describes Earth as a 10,000 frequency geodesic? Thinking of Earth as a 10,000 frequency geodesic is also as strange and new as the conceptuality of the vector equilibrium equanimity model that shares the same design in both the physical and metaphysical universe. Nevertheless, the omni-rational terminology might momentarily pique your interest as a welcome change of scenes from the events on the news and the subject matters in the latest movies and network series about not yet imagining any correlation to what obviously is a long overdue, viable alternative option where repetitive problems continue to involve reactionary players to commit the most insidious extremes of the human personality on the world stage. In quotes, the continuity of conscious life becomes personality as a product of complex periodic interactions known as cycles or periodic recurrences of a higher frequency order, end quote. This Bucky Fuller quotation is from his book Ideas and Integrities in an Essay, Total Thinking, 1949. It is worth remembering, primarily because we really have not yet associated the geometry of periodic interactions, which are of the generalized fields of knowledge, and an evolving personality of the individual or the nation as a conceptual system that coincides with systemic thoughts, anticipatory design, science, realities. Yet humanly innovative productions result in any case. This continues as a continuity of conscious life as events naturally require. The energy we rarely accredit to the conservation of it in universe, and the human imagination's ability to formulate conceptually with an awareness that the only two possible covariables operative in all universe design are modification of angle and frequency. This may mean that while distracted by the most foolish news reporting that omit by default educated ignorance and predominant PRJWBCH influence, the most relevant information, which is energy and synergy of self-regenerative universe, our humanity fails to evolve to our higher potential. Isn't it about time to admit our negligence with respect to awareness of dynamic equilibrium and what Bucky Fuller wrote in the R. Buckminster Fuller Synergetics Dictionary, 24 April 1976, in quotes, equilibrium elucidates the difference between the unreality of status quo parallel at rest economics and motion economics, which evolves the reality of universe, end quote. To be continued in part 2, episode 24. Thank you.